Every day at noon, Amazing Grace rings out from Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. A powerful hymn of redemption and forgiveness. But finding forgiveness, a daunting task when evil strikes in an unexpected place.
You would think that within a church, you would feel safe.
When the dust had cleared, 9 were dead, including my sister Cynthia.
A white nationalist trying to start a race war in the basement of a black church.
The officers identified the only occupant of the vehicle, Dylan Roof.
This was one of the worst hate crimes in modern U.S. history, and you can't forgive that.
This is the story of a pastor trying to help his congregation heal.
And at the same time, knowing that every day I come into what was a crime scene.
And this is the story of a brother grieving a loss, but focused on his sister's life.
I miss her.
It's the story of the Emanuel 9, 10 years later.
Everyone. Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to Park Road Books tonight. Thank you.
It's late April in Charlotte, North Carolina.
For my book, The Way Forward, it's a year in the making, and a lot of hard work and time.
It's Malcolm Graham's first book event in Charlotte, where he's a city councilman and former state senator.
The book really is not about what happened. It's about what happened to me as I walked through those days and hours and weeks and months after the shooting.
A church shooting in his hometown of Charleston that took 9 lives, including the pastor and state senator Clementa Pinckney, including the life of Malcolm's sister, Cynthia.
We got work to do.
The book guides the reader through his journey chapter by chapter. Our story has its own chapters through not only Malcolm Graham's eyes, but the pastor brought in to shepherd a grieving congregation.
My mom, my grandmother, they were all raised in the Emanuel AME Church. This is home. Emanuel's been a part of our family for some 50, 60 years.
Malcolm Graham doesn't visit Emanuel AME as often anymore, but he agreed this time for us, someone I've interviewed for some 20 years now. But it's not easy to be here, a complicated blend of memories of his sister's horrific death, but also his childhood.
I sung in the junior choir, served as an usher, a junior usher. My sister Jackie got married here. Both of our parents are buried in the graveyard at Emanuel AME Church.
Graham has a memory for nearly every square inch.
I think where I'm sitting right here is where I probably said my Easter speech, right? We would come up here and, we were required to give a speech every Easter. I always wanted the shortest one, Jesus wept. I can remember that without thinking, right? And my mom like, no, you got to do something much tougher than that, right?
It's a beautiful Gothic design church.
Founded in 1817, it's the oldest African Methodist Episcopal Church, or AME, in the South.
Going back to the 1800s, where African Americans were fighting for freedom and equality and personhood, fighting for their humanity. The black church, Emanuel, was a part of that, where people kind of came to worship, but they also came here to strategize and plan.
Throughout history, of course, you have prominent folks like Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, then of course Martin Luther King Jr. There's a picture of him sitting in that same chair.
But that push for change has historically also put the church in the crosshairs of those fighting change.
It's kind of interesting, right, that this historic black church, Emanuel AME Church, that was burnt down because of its position on race and equality and slavery, searching for freedom. It's at 110 Calhoun Street. John C. Calhoun, who was, in modern terminology, would be considered a white nationalist or a racist.
A complicated history that would resurface in 2015.
she would have said that the attack was really not against her, but against a race of people.
The story of June 17, 2015 starts when 21-year-old Dylan Roof walked into Emanuel AME.
It was a Wednesday night. Many communities throughout this country have Bible study. Emanuel AME Church was no different. He looked like any college kid. He entered the door and asked if he could be involved in Bible study, and they said yes. They welcomed him. They prayed and studied for an hour.
They embraced him in prayer, but Roof was planning an attack.
And after that hour was over, during the benediction, when heads were bowed and eyes were closed, 77 shots rung out. I feared dead, and so I immediately called Cynthia.
Malcolm Graham was at home in Charlotte when it happened.
Cynthia was my touchstone to all things Charleston. She was still a member of the church, very involved in the community. And so I said, let me call Cynthia to see what's happening. And about 30 minutes went by. She didn't return my phone call. I was saying, well, maybe Cynthia's trying to figure out what's happening herself.
As the minutes passed, the news updates grew grimmer by the minute.
And then my niece called, Megan, and said, hey, we can't find Aunt Cynthia. We think she went to Bible study, and it just took off from there.
No answer from Cynthia, but the phones inside that church basement continued to ring.
One of the things that a lot of the police officers, FBI agents said that was kind of haunting to them was when they were processing the scene, that all the cell phones were going off.
By the time Roof stopped shooting and fled from the church, the damage was horrifying, but his motive would make matters worse.
He said he did it because black individuals were stealing their women and taking their jobs, and that he had to do it.
A jail journal and manifesto later made clear his racial hatred and lack of remorse. The Charleston community was terrified, trying to make sense of it.
The only reason someone could walk into church and shoot people praying is out of hate.
We talked with Graham outside the church the next day when he arrived from Charlotte.
You try to rationalize what happened, and there's no rationalization for it.
Just 5 days later, Graham did an interview in our studios, sharing just how important Cynthia was to his family.
My mom and my father both died in the late 80s, 84 and 86, and Cynthia, being the oldest daughter, she kind of pulled the family together and made sure that my sister Jackie and I, and we have 3 older brothers, that we kind of stayed together, stuck together, looked out for one another.
Our next guest has been through a lot in the past several weeks.
Just 21 days after the shooting, I interviewed Malcolm for the first time. The gravity of why she died clearly settling in.
My sister died simply because she was black, and the flag was embroiled in that murder simply because the perpetrator believed in it.
A day after the shooting, police captured Dylan Roof in Shelby, North Carolina, about 3.5 hours from Charleston.
The officers identified the only occupant of the vehicle as Dylan Roof. Mr. Roof was taken into custody at 10:49 a.m.
He faced 33 federal charges, including murder and hate crimes. A nation stunned with the wounds of its past reopened yet again.
To say our thoughts and prayers are with them and their families and their community doesn't say enough to convey the heartache and the sadness and the anger that we feel.
Cynthia would have said that while they bore the brunt of being killed that night, that it really was an attack on a race of people.
When we return, the story behind Reverend Eric Manning's emotional call to serve Emanuel AME and his first message to the congregation.
Amen. Good morning, beloved. We greet you this morning in the joy of being in the presence of the Almighty God.
When the church's pastor was killed in the shooting, the church faced a difficult year of transition. The bishop needed a new voice to lead the congregation by 2016.
When I got the call from Bishop Norris at the time, It was a Tuesday, late morning.
Reverend Eric Manning answered the call, quickly realizing his life was about to change.
He said, I need you to, go to Mother Emanuel.
The gravity of the call to serve quickly filled his heart.
A wide range of emotions. And again, like I said, I asked the question, who am I? Who am I to serve? Who am I? What was it that Bishop Norris saw in me to send me to serve this congregation?
He did no interviews, wanting the congregation to hear him first.
We had never really visited Charleston except for once or twice with my mother-in-law. Never visited Mother Emanuel.
Then on June 20th, 2016, 1 year and 3 days after the shooting, he stepped up to the pulpit.
And I shared with the congregation, I don't know where or how to lead you, because I didn't. Some were thinking that I would come immediately with a vision. I'm like, no, because I don't know who you are.
He used a children's sermon to prove a point. He was there to serve them.
So I found one of the, the smallest children. Obviously his shoe was untied. So I knelt down to tie his shoe. And I shared with the congregation. I didn't come to, be served, but I've come to serve you all. And people just, I guess, didn't know how to take it. People applauded. People were thankful. But again, I think it's been 9 years of servanthood, of just serving the congregation, meeting the members where they are at times, not getting it right, but still trying to do the very best we can.
For the first 3 months, serving in ways perhaps no reverend has ever experienced.
Then I spent time with clinicians here to learn how to become trauma-informed and trauma-aware. And then, of course, leading up to the federal trials. All right, so within 3 months, I had to come to get to know the congregation, understand the families, understand where everyone was, because I saw my role realistically as the shepherd to lead them through this season. God. It has been rewarding. It has been humbling. And I am thankful for the time that God has given me to learn and to grow through this season.
In Jesus' name, amen.
When we return, President Obama meets with the families, speaks, and even sings at one of the funerals.
She used to tell me, because I had a little measure of success, that I was the most famous person in the family. But in her death, she is the most famous person in our family.
As the nation focused on the hate crimes that took place, the families planned funerals. 10 days after the shooting, Cynthia Graham Hurd's celebration of life took place in the same church where she died.
It poured rain much like it is today, didn't it?
It was like never rained as hard in my life as the day of Cynthia's funeral. And then when we got to the graveyard, it just cleared rainbow in the sky, and everything was calm and peace, and I call it tears from heaven.
The funeral most of you probably remember was Reverend Clementa Pinckney. It was the day before Cynthia's funeral. President Barack Obama delivered the eulogy.
Reverend Pinckney once said, "Across the South, we have a deep appreciation of history. We haven't always had a deep appreciation of each other's history."
As the eulogy ended, the President of the United States paused.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
During my interview with Malcolm in the church, that song popped up again.
Racism, discrimination, hatred continues to be this country's Achilles heel.
Struck by Roasted Amazing Grace playing at the church here.
What was so amazing about him singing that song is that when I ran for Congress, Cynthia was very excited because she wanted to meet the president and Michelle. Obviously, I lost that campaign, and she didn't get the opportunity to do that. But she met them in death. And he said from the podium that Cynthia Graham Hurd found that grace.
Cynthia Hurd found that grace.
After the service, President Obama met with each family. Graham talks about it extensively in the book.
He was in Charleston from about 8 o'clock that morning to about 3 o'clock a.m. the next. He met with every family for well over an hour.
Graham also talked with then Vice President Joe Biden on the phone several times. Two men grieving the loss of loved ones at the same time.
It was right after he lost his son, Bo, to cancer. And I never thought in the world I would tell the vice president at that time, Joe, I got to go, man. It's been 45 minutes, right? But he spent about 45 minutes with me on the phone. And to the point where I had to say, listen, I got something else to do. He said, well, I'll call you back tomorrow. And sure enough, he did.
Biden later recorded a message for the Cynthia Graham Hurd Foundation, launched to continue her legacy as a steward for literacy and reading.
18 days before Cynthia lost her life, I lost my son, Bo. So I needed grace from Malcolm as much as he needed grace from me.
There's that word again, grace, heard prominently throughout those first days and years ahead.
May grace now lead them home. May God continue to shed his grace on the United States of America.
But finding grace and forgiveness when a white supremacist killed 9 black parishioners in their own church? A question that challenged the victims' families then and to this very day. When we return, families wrestle with the idea of forgiveness and the sacred space where the massacre happened.
And all of a sudden, one of the family members said, well, we forgive you. And then another said, we forgive you too. And I nearly wrecked a car.
Forgiveness, perhaps, is one of the most challenging concepts of human nature. Concept debated right outside the church in the hours after the shooting.
And all of y'all need to lift him up in prayer. Nobody should be saying we hate him. Nobody should be saying whatever. We don't know what went on in this young man's mind.
A year after the shooting, I met Malcolm Graham in Charleston. He was not in a place to forgive Dylan Roof.
Doesn't mean I don't have forgiveness in my heart. I mean, what happened inside of the church was not only an attack on the 9 individuals who were killed, the 5 others that were terrorized, but it was an attack on a race of people.
But his frustration surrounding forgiveness started literally 2 days after it all happened.
That's when I heard the bond hearing where the magistrate talked about the killer's family being a victim as well, right? And spent a lot of time talking about the killer's family in this courtroom full of grieving African Americans, and then gave them an opportunity to speak. And the first 2 speakers talk about that they forgave them. And I nearly wrecked the car because by that time, Cynthia was still in the morgue.
10 years later, not much has changed.
I thought the last thing we needed to do was forgive him for committing the worst hate crime in U.S. history at that time. And I didn't then, and I don't today. It doesn't mean I walk around bitter or with hatred in my heart. I love my race. I love the African American community, and the last thing I want to do for it is to be extinct. And that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to kill literally a race of people. And I want to defend my people, the African American community, everyone that looks like me, defend their humanity. And you don't do that by taking a knee and forgiving someone who does that.
Forgiveness early on when I came to serve Mother Emanuel was interesting, right? I say it was interesting because, everybody, from a Christian tenet perspective, we always want to forgive. That's it. We just want to forgive. We want to forgive. And it's hard for people to understand that outside of the Christian faith.
In 9 years at Emanuel AME, Reverend Manning has learned every family member must find their own path.
If I expect God to forgive me, then surely I must forgive others. and extend that same level of grace that God has extended to me. Easier said than done.
And for some, it takes longer than others.
It does.
Beyond forgiveness, there was another challenging question. How does all of this happen in a church of all places? Graham addresses this in his book as well.
I actually lost my faith. Where was God? How could something like this happen in the church? A place where Cynthia knew, I knew, right? Look at the stained glass windows, right? How could something like this happen within the walls of the stained glass window where God is with us? He walks with us, he talks with us, right? Where was he that night? And so I question those things, and I go back to, again, the meaning of Emanuel itself, and needing to keep the faith. My mom was really, really religious, and she would be in these church schools, and she would catch the Holy Ghost, and she would jump up and down and scream and holler and praise the Lord here and there, and so she was a woman of strong faith. And in my mind, her and Cynthia would talk to me and say, "Hey, dude, keep the faith." When the dust had cleared, 9 were dead, including my sister Cynthia.
The Emanuel 9 were killed in the church basement, a place where generations of children have attended Sunday school, where Bible study took place that horrific night. A year after the shooting, Malcolm Graham told me about his first visit back to the place where his sister was murdered.
I went into it when they opened the church after the shooting, and the first thing I did is bowed and kneed where they all sat. It was extremely emotional the first time around, and it still is today.
Yeah, so it took me a minute.
Reverend Eric Manning never visited the church before answering the call to serve. Today his office door opens to that basement room.
I knew the space, right? But as we prepared for the federal trial and seeing the footage, which still continues to resonate in the recesses of my mind, knowing, and at the same time, knowing that every day I come into what was a crime scene. So I come in with reverence, with respect, still with a sense of gratitude, and still with a sense of remembrance.
During our visit, Graham agreed to take us down there. We went down a dark back stairwell in the sanctuary.
You run up and down these stairs a lot?
When I was a young guy.
Reverend Manning no longer allows filming in the space. To an outsider walking in, it looks like so many other church basements. These pictures in this video show what it looks like. But pictures don't show you what it feels like, as it sinks in what happened here on June 17, 2015. Malcolm's face and emotions changed as soon as light appeared and we entered the room. Earlier, he told us more about that first visit in 2015.
I remember, I guess me and Commissioner Mark Gerald came down. Mark was my campaign manager, and when I was running for Congress, and we had an event in Charleston. He came down with me, and it was the first time that I came to the church in the basement after the shooting, and there was a chill in the air, right? Just kind of thinking about, that space and where we went to Sunday school and had, community meetings and all kind of stuff downstairs in the basement, the minister's office. That space still gives me chills when I walk through it.
The space functions today much like it did before the shooting, but Reverend Manning feels an obligation to keep it sacred, the reason for the ban on filming.
And as I vowed to the families and as I vowed to the community, as long as I am serving Mother Emanuel, we will never forget, hence our Emanuel 9 pins, right? And I do my very best to protect this space, right? And to make sure that there's always a degree of reverence.
When we return, a closer look at Cynthia Graham Hurd's legacy and dealing with the impact of Dylan Roof's decisions.
And I thought it would be such a honor and privilege to write a book and place it in her library.
This was a portrait of Cynthia that was done at the College of Charleston.
Cynthia Graham Hurd was a career librarian despite majoring in math.
Gives a little history about Cynthia.
She spent 31 years as a librarian in Charleston and 16 years as a night librarian at the College of Charleston. She was a branch manager here when she died, a librarian through and through.
She would be very frustrated right now with me and you because we're talking in the library, in the public space, and of course it's a quiet zone, right? She's an old school librarian.
Old school, who loved reading from a young age as their siblings played sports around her.
Cynthia would play for maybe a second or two, and then she would always sit on Secret Heart church entrance watching us play. But you know what she was doing? Reading. She always had a book, reading. When I think of Cynthia, I think of the library. This is her happy space, and so when I come in here, it's about joy and happiness, and I can feel her spirit in the room because this is where she was most comfortable, where she loved the most.
A place she loved, a place that now bears her name.
They wanted to quickly get the name up there, and they honored Cynthia in such a way at the county council meeting and changed the name of the library. And so it's, again, it just looks really neat, right? Having her name on the side of the library.
She would have think that it's pretty amazing that I can write 2 or 3 sentences together.
In recent years, Malcolm Graham felt a desire to share his experience.
There are other books about Charleston and the shootings that's out there for sure, but I wanted to kind of put it in writing from my perspective for my grandsons, Carter and Ashton, to say, hey, what happened to Aunt Cynthia, right?
Most of the other families have kept a low profile, but since day one, Graham has felt an obligation to speak up.
I made a pledge to Cynthia in death that I would be her voice, that I would speak up for her, that I would use all the training and the skills I had as a nonprofit executive director, a state senator, a council member, at that time a congressional candidate, using the microphone that I had to talk about the issues that killed her.
The result? A book called The Way Forward.
What do you think she would think if she saw that her brother had a book on the shelves at her library?
She would be like, I hope he didn't grammatically correct, right? She would be tickled pink, right? For me to put my experience on paper.
The book tackles what happened, but it also tackles what he thinks should happen next.
You can't be afraid not to talk about it. You can't be afraid to peel the onion back, right? We talk about Charleston in the book being nice, nasty, right? Nice on the outside, but once you start peeling it back, you can kind of see some of the ugliness of this community from its past, right? The racism and the hatred, and you can't walk away from that. And so part of the way forward is just acknowledging what we got to do, right? And so my faith in country is shaken a little bit because this is not who we are.
When I first interviewed Graham just 3 weeks after his sister's death, he focused on Cynthia, not Dylan Roof.
Well, be quite honest with you, I paid little attention to him at all. I quite honestly can't tell you what his name is. I don't want to give him power.
But his attention eventually did turn to Roof, who faced 33 federal charges and 9 state charges for murder, hate crimes, and more. The federal trial began in December 2016, nearly 18 months after the crime. Graham drove back and forth to Charleston from Charlotte every single day for weeks. By mid-December, a jury convicted Roof. At his sentencing hearing, Graham took the stand. He wrote about that in his book.
Testifying on behalf of your sister is heartbreaking.
By January 2017, Roof was sentenced to death, a sentence Graham told me as early as 2016 he supports.
If you cannot get the death penalty for going into a church, killing 9 individuals unarmed, premeditated, terrorizing 5 others, terrorizing a community, if that's not worthy of the death penalty, then we might as well strike it off the books.
Roof remains on death row in Indiana and continues to fight the sentence through appeals even 10 years later. When we return, a look at Charleston's complicated history, how families feel about race relations a decade later, and the legacy the Emanuel 9 leave for all of us.
He scoured the church for weeks and months. He also had a listing of other black churches in his possession when he was arrested.
When Journals and a Confession made it clear Roof targeted the historic black church, hundreds of years of history bubbled to the surface.
I remember thinking that here we go again, right? The same thing that kind of drove me away from Charleston: hatred, racism, and discrimination. My mom was a domestic worker. My father, a truck driver. I noticed how white individuals treated them. Strom Thurmond was our U.S. senator, and some other well-known white nationalists or racists were governing the state. The Confederate flag flew high, and so I was ready to leave. And because of that same history of race and discrimination and hatred, and the same thing that drove me away brought me back, which was to deal with the death of my sister, and that occurred here at this historic church based on race and hatred and discrimination.
Charleston's a city of contradiction, still grappling with its history of the African slave trade, the Jim Crow era, and racial inequality while building a new future. A future full of hope and promise, but reminders of a nation's wounds and wrongs around every corner. While workers construct multi-million-dollar condos on one street, around another corner, tourists flock to the old slave mart, a place where slaves were once auctioned off. Around another corner, a young girl plays in a fancy fountain, and a bride dreams of a future outside the U.S. Custom House built in the late 1800s. It's a destination with world-class restaurants as historic markers spell out a troubled past. Graham talks about the gentrification and changes impacting the city and church in his book.
Now the demographic shift in Charleston is that white folks are moving in the downtown Charleston, blacks are moving on the outside of Charleston, right? So if there's no black folks in downtown Charleston, because now the black folks are going to the churches in the country, quote unquote, the church is dying in terms of its membership. So it's dwindling down.
Despite hope the church massacre will ignite a conversation and change, 10 years later, Graham remains frustrated.
The banning of books and black history and this whole false analogy about DEI, right? What it is and what it isn't, right? It's political spin, right? It's a wedge issue meant to divide people. No merit to it. So I think we are, and I think because we didn't spend the time asking tough questions after Charleston, and that we were so quick to forgive after Charleston, we didn't do the work necessary to make people just a little bit uncomfortable.
In Graham's book, And in Life, he refers to it often as healthy tension.
This is Reverend Manning. We are here in Columbia, South Carolina.
In many ways, Reverend Manning carries on Emanuel AME's social justice legacy.
We thank God for this opportunity once again to participate in a peaceful protest.
Just days after marking 5 years since the shooting, and a month after George Floyd was killed, Reverend Manning marched in South Carolina's capital.
To shout from the top of our roof, shout from the tops of our mouth that this is our time, and of course the fact that Black Lives Matter.
The next day, Emanuel AME again, like so many times in its history, found itself front and center in the social justice movement.
No justice, no peace. We're trying to take that stand for
social justice. We're trying to be that voice. We're trying to still make sure that people remember that hate has no place in our society, that we must love the immigrant, that we must love everyone.
But hate has caused the church to change its ways. The open doors that allowed Dylan Roof inside now force church leaders to close a door on that chapter.
We now have a thing called security protocols. Should a pastor have to know the security protocols? No, but we do. Do we always have to be mindful and vigilant? Yeah, we do. Does it sometimes cause you some level of stress and concern? Yes, it does. But it's something that we have to now just live with. Now, again, I would never think this was part of God's design, but through the hateful act of others, through not seeing each other in the way that God has called us all to see ourselves, we find ourselves in this season.
Which is why he worries so little has changed in many ways since Dylan Roof entered this church 10 years ago.
I'm gravely concerned because it seems as if there used to be other folks, voices in the wilderness crying out. I don't hear those voices that much anymore, right? It seems as if there is a spirit of intimidation. People are fearful. I get it, but I always invoke the Edmund Burke quote, right? The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to sit around and do nothing. I hope and pray that there are some more good people out there who will say this is unacceptable.
It's a tourist attraction now, and they're trying to find their identity post massacre.
10 years later, Emanuel AME itself has changed. Its congregation continues to age and shrink. Reverend Manning continues to lead the congregation, still healing and finding a new path forward. But he hopes his chapter in Emanuel AME's latest story ends with hope.
Realistically, at the end of the day, I'm just a guy who is serving. And when my time comes to an end, I'm sure it will, I would hope and pray that the congregation, that Mother Emanuel, that other people would be able to say, yeah, I'm doing better today. And I'm going to hold on by God's grace.
Despite the painful memories, nearly everyone wants to make sure the shooting is never forgotten. In light of that, this house of worship, opened in 1891, getting a new addition after 134 years.
So what do we got over here?
We got the building of the Emanuel 9 Memorial, scheduled to be completed next January.
In 2023, the church broke ground on the memorial and unveiled its plans.
The memorial is a wonderful message of forgiveness.
It's a way of welcoming people. I believe the memorial will be an illustration of the resiliency of the survivors and also the resiliency of the people of Charleston.
It's a permanent marker, right, of what happened here 10 years ago, and a tribute to those who survived and those who we lost. And like I said, after 10 years, you kind of lose it to history. This is a permanent reminder.
Two fellowship benches facing each other will encourage people to sit, talk, and inspire positive change.
If we fail to have those meaningful conversations, the price could be that other people may lose their lives. So hopefully this becomes a place where those who are extreme left, those who are extreme right, can come and have a meaningful conversation.
Malcolm Graham continues to focus on Cynthia's life, not her death. How her impact here at the library lives on through others.
I hear stories all the time from individuals who knew Cynthia and said, well, Cynthia taught me how to read. Cynthia taught me how to write. Cynthia taught me how to use a computer. Cynthia helped me do my term paper, helped me through get my doctor's degree, writing my thesis and my dissertation. And so she was that type of person that she was a helper. And this was her laboratory.
She also impacts him to this day. I remember vividly asking him just weeks after she died how her death might impact his future.
Has this at all inspired you further to potentially run for public office again? I know we've had this discussion before. You've thought about it. Has that crossed your mind when you think about these issues again?
Well, I answer it this way. One of the last conversations I had with Cynthia was just that. I mean, what are you going to do next?
He lost 2 congressional races, but he refused to walk away.
So help me God. Welcome to this new 2020-2021 council.
In 2019, he ran and won a seat on the Charlotte City Council where he remains today.
I'm back.
As he writes in the book, keeping the faith and doing the work.
Let's do big things, Council, not small things. I'm ready to get to work. Thank you.
Finding grace in his own way and on his terms. As the 10-year mark passes, the Reverend and the Councilman are laser focused on legacy.
So we must continue to remember not necessarily how they died, but remember how they lived. And as we remember how they lived, then do our very best to draw our communities closer together so that way no community has to ever go through this again.
This foundation video still gets me every time I watch it. A brother missing his sister, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders to make sure Cynthia Graham Hurd is never forgotten.
Still to this day, she encourages me. And so her memory is everywhere. And I miss her. But we're celebrating not how she died, but how she lived and who she is. And that's why I'm so happy through these tears, because she lived a good life.